Imagine a country that just a few decades ago was completely out of money,
Oh, wow. Like literally bankrupt.
literally out of cash.
Yes.
We were talking about a nation that was heavily restricted by endless bureaucracy, drowning in debt, and, growing at this incredibly sluggish, painful pace.
Right.
Now, I want you to fast forward to today. Picture this exact same country landing a spacecraft on the moon's south pole.
That's a massive leap.
It is. And imagine a place that handles 97% of its payments entirely digitally. Meanwhile, places like the U.S. still heavily rely on physical paper checks.
Which is honestly so wild to think about.
Exactly. Imagine a nation that is currently on track to be the world's third largest economy.
So, how does a nation of over 1.4 billion people completely flip its destiny in like a single generation? And more importantly, what can you learn from their playbook?
Welcome to the Missing Lessons, where we explain what school never did.
Yes.
Today, we are exploring how India transformed into a modern superpower.
Yeah.
And understanding this isn't just about global economics.
Right, it's bigger than that.
It really is. It's a masterclass in how to adapt, leapfrog outdated systems, and use a young demographic to change the world.
Absolutely.
If you're enjoying the Missing Lessons, make sure to follow the podcast, leave a rating, and share it with someone who might find it interesting. It helps us create more episodes and reach more curious minds.
So, to understand a transformation of this scale, we really have to look at the starting line, right?
Right.
Because the economic reality of India in the mid-20th century was essentially, well, a pressure cooker.
A pressure cooker without a release valve. I mean, for nearly 200 years, India was under colonial rule, which basically functioned as a massive wealth extraction machine.
Yeah, local industries were completely dismantled.
Exactly. And the infrastructure was built purely to ship resources out, not to, connect the population within. So when India gained independence in 1947, the country inherited just widespread poverty.
And a severe lack of industrialization.
Right. So the initial solution of the new government was to adopt this heavily state-controlled economic model. They wanted to protect their fragile new domestic industries from foreign competition, so they just locked the economy down.
Meaning they made it incredibly difficult to do business without, like, strict government permission.
Unbelievably difficult. I mean, if you owned a factory and you just wanted to produce, say, 20 extra bicycles a month, you often had to get explicit permission from government bureaucrats.
That sounds exhausting.
It was. And this web of regulations created massive economic stagnation. For decades, the economy grew at a really sluggish 3 to 4% a year.
Wow.
But you cannot artificially restrict a massive population forever. So by 1991, the pressure cooker finally exploded. India faced this catastrophic balance of payments crisis.
So let's break down what a balance of payments crisis actually means in practical terms, because it sounds like academic jargon, but it's essentially a national bankruptcy, right?
Yeah, think of it like a household budget.
Yeah.
A country needs foreign currency, mostly US dollars, to buy essential goods on the global market.
Like oil.
Exactly. Oil to keep the lights on and the trucks running. Well, by 1991, India literally ran out of dollars. They had enough foreign reserves left to cover barely 3 weeks of imports.
Wait, just 3 weeks?
3 weeks. The situation was so desperate, they actually had to physically fly their national gold reserves to London just to secure emergency loans.
That is incredibly dire.
It was. They were backed into a corner, and those emergency loans came with really strict conditions. They were forced into shock therapy.
Right.
Practically overnight, India had to lower its trade tariffs, slash the bureaucratic red tape, and throw open its doors to foreign investment.
But wait, I have to challenge this logic a bit.
Yeah.
When a struggling, historically closed-off country suddenly opens its doors to these massive, wealthy, global giants, don't they just get swallowed up?
It's a fair question.
Because if I'm a local business that's been protected for 40 years, I feel like I'm getting crushed by multinational monopolies overnight.
That is the natural fear, yeah. And in many countries, that is exactly what happens. But this is where India's playbook becomes really fascinating.
Okay, how so?
Instead of just rolling over and becoming like a giant dumping ground for Western consumer products, they utilized this forced opening to pivot their entire strategy.
Right.
They didn't try to immediately beat the West at traditional heavy manufacturing. Instead, they transitioned from a closed economy to a global player by aggressively building out their own technology and service industries.
Oh, wow. So they leaned into digital.
Completely. They took this new open market and used it to build domestic titans in software development and IT services.
Hmm.
They started providing the digital backbone, the cybersecurity, and, the cloud computing for businesses all over the world.
That's brilliant.
It was. But to build a new digital economy from scratch, they needed one specific, highly combustible fuel. And it wasn't oil or lithium, it was human capital.
Which brings us to a massive demographic shift.
Yeah.
I mean, India recently surpassed China to become the world's most populous nation, right?
Right.
With over 1.4 billion citizens. But just having a massive population isn't automatically an advantage. If you have a billion people and no opportunities, you don't have a superpower, you have a crisis.
Exactly. The secret weapon isn't the raw number of people. It's the structure of that population. Economists look at something called the dependency ratio. This is a vital concept for understanding global power.
Right. The dependency ratio measures the number of working-age people producing wealth compared to the number of, well, very young and very old people who are just consuming resources.
Bingo. When you have a massive bubble of working-age people and a relatively small number of dependents, you unlock what is called a demographic dividend.
And when you look at the global landscape right now, the contrast is just stark. Much of the developed world is rapidly aging out of the workforce.
The rest of the world is getting old and fast. Let's look at the median ages. In Japan, the median age is pushing 50. In Europe, it's over 44. In China, it's around 40. These countries are facing this inverted pyramid where a shrinking base of young workers has to support a massive, growing population of retirees.
Yeah, which is a huge economic burden.
Huge. Now look at India. Their median age is around 28 years old.
So you have this literal tidal wave of young people entering their prime earning and spending years simultaneously.
A tidal wave that creates a totally self-sustaining economic engine. Roughly 60% of India's GDP is driven entirely by domestic consumption.
That's massive.
It is. Paint a picture of this in your mind. You have millions of young workers receiving their very first paychecks. They're buying their first smartphones.
They're purchasing their first scooters to navigate the cities.
Exactly. They are renting their first apartments and buying their first refrigerators. Because the domestic market is so unimaginably huge, this engine just hums along, creating constant demand.
So they don't even have to rely on what the rest of the world is doing.
Right. It fuels growth regardless of the global economy.
But, I mean, this has to create a massive logistical bottleneck, right? When hundreds of millions of people suddenly need to buy things, traditional 20th century systems physically cannot handle that volume.
They absolutely cannot. You can't build brick-and-mortar bank branches or mail out physical debit cards fast enough to onboard 500 million new consumers.
Yeah, that would take decades.
It would. And that bottleneck forced India to execute one of the most vital lessons of this deep dive: the digital leapfrog.
The digital leapfrog. Okay, explain that.
Well, because they had a massive, young, tech-hungry population, they didn't bother laying down the expensive, outdated infrastructure that the West relies on. They leaped over it entirely.
Right.
They built a system called UPI, the Unified Payments Interface.
And the mechanics of UPI are fundamentally different from how money moves in the United States or Europe, right?
Entirely different. In the West, digital payments rely on private toll roads. If a business wants to accept a credit card, they have to use private networks built by massive financial corporations. And they have to pay a toll, often 2 or 3% of the transaction, just to use that road.
Which really adds up.
Oh, big time. UPI, on the other hand, is an open digital public infrastructure. It is a massive public highway built by the government that allows instant bank transfers via smartphones.
So the government laid down the foundational highway and then invited private companies to just build their apps on top of it.
Exactly. Picture a normal everyday interaction. Imagine a student walking up to a street vendor in a rural village to buy, like, a 50-cent cup of tea.
Okay, in the old system, that requires physical coins.
Right. But today, that student pulls out their smartphone, scans a piece of paper with a QR code taped to the vendor's cart, and pays instantly.
Wow.
The money moves straight from the student's bank account to the vendor's bank account in 2 seconds. There are no physical banks involved in that moment. There are no expensive plastic card readers.
And most importantly, that street vendor pays 0 transaction fees.
0. Today, a staggering 97% of all payments in India are entirely digital.
It is wild to think that they essentially skipped the entire credit card era. Like, they went straight from a society reliant on paper cash to a mobile-first world.
Pretty much overnight.
Have you noticed this in your own life? Have you ever tried to hold on to an old way of doing things when a much faster digital option was right in front of you? It's human nature to resist, but adaptation is where the growth is. Drop a like and a comment on the video if you've experienced that resistance yourself.
Yeah, and that digital leapfrog didn't just solve a banking problem. It drastically lowered the cost of doing business across the board.
Right.
By making transactions frictionless, it sparked a booming technology and startup ecosystem. India is now one of the 5 largest startup ecosystems on the planet.
That's incredible.
And this infrastructure really changed how the rest of the world views the country. It used to be that multinational corporations looked to India merely for basic back office support or, customer service call centers.
But not anymore. Now we are seeing the massive expansion of global capability centers,
Exactly.
which are essentially the nerve centers for global innovation rather than just support desks.
Precisely. Today, a company like Mercedes-Benz does the cutting-edge research and development for their future global vehicles right in Pune, India.
Wait, really? The R&D is done there.
Yeah. There are over 1,700 of these global capability centers operating in the country right now. Furthermore, the sheer volume of highly skilled engineers produced by this digital-first society has fundamentally reshaped global leadership.
Oh, definitely.
I mean, Indian-educated engineers now run some of the biggest and most powerful tech companies on Earth. The CEOs of Google, Microsoft, and IBM all came through this exact pipeline.
Which brings us to the macro level, because
Yeah.
if a country becomes this indispensable, both as a massive consumer market for products and as the brain trust for global technology, they gain an immense amount of leverage politically.
They hold massive weight. And this leverage is driving a major shift in how the entire world operates. We're moving away from a unipolar world where there is one big boss calling the shots, and we are entering what geopolitics calls a multiplex world.
Meaning power is fragmented. It's no longer just two superpowers playing chess. It's multiple regions holding serious influence.
Exactly. Think of it like a multiplex movie theater. There are many different screens, many different shows happening at once, and different regions hold serious power in their own specific theaters.
Right.
India is navigating this multiplex world through a brilliant diplomatic balancing act known as strategic autonomy. They absolutely refuse to be boxed into a single traditional alliance.
Okay, so how does that work in practice?
Well, on one hand, they are a vital part of the Quad security partnership with the United States, Japan, and Australia, heavily cooperating on security in the Indo-Pacific region.
Right.
But simultaneously, they are a foundational member of the BRICS economic group, alongside Brazil, Russia, China, and South Africa, which actively works to build financial institutions that challenge Western dominance.
But hold on, let's look at this critically.
Okay.
If they are running joint military exercises with the United States while simultaneously joining economic groups with China and buying millions of barrels of discounted oil from Russia, doesn't that make them fundamentally untrustworthy to Western allies? I mean, you can't play all sides forever.
It definitely looks contradictory through a Cold War lens, but India's strategy isn't about being everyone's best friend. It's about ruthless self-interest.
Right.
They don't have an anti-Western ideology,
Yeah.
but they also refuse to just be a follower of any other great power. They want a seat at every high table. And because their market is so valuable, the West basically has no choice but to accept these terms.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And this positioning is paying off massively right now, specifically because of the tension between the U.S. and China.
The supply chain vulnerabilities. Global companies have realized that relying on a single country for all their manufacturing is a massive existential risk.
It is a massive risk. So the biggest corporations in the world are executing the China plus one strategy.
Right.
They aren't leaving China entirely, but they are terrified of having all their factories concentrated there. They need a plus one, a massive, politically stable alternative with a giant labor force.
And India has positioned itself perfectly to be that alternative.
Perfectly. The government is aggressively building out highways, deep water ports, and offering massive financial incentives to lure these factories.
And the clearest example of this is Apple, right? Shifting a significant and growing portion of its iPhone manufacturing out of China and directly into India.
Exactly. And their capabilities stretch far beyond assembling consumer electronics.
Right.
The ultimate proof of their engineering efficiency is their space program, ISRO. I mean, they achieved a historic lunar landing, putting a rover on the moon's south pole.
Which is incredible on its own.
It is. But the most staggering part isn't just that they did it. It's that they did it on a fraction of the budget of Western space agencies.
Really?
Yeah. They prove that you can accomplish deeply complex, world-class scientific goals with extreme efficiency without the bloated budgets of the past.
Wow. So the journey from being completely out of money in 1991 to landing on the moon and acting as the global pivot point between East and West is an incredible transformation.
It really is.
But how does this translate to the individual?
That is exactly what we focus on here. How do you apply this macroeconomic playbook to your own life?
Yeah.
Because the principles that elevated a nation of 1.4 billion people can absolutely elevate you.
Okay, let's hear it.
The first major takeaway is a concept we can call personal leapfrogging. Think about how India skipped laying thousands of miles of expensive copper wire for landline phones and instead went straight to mobile internet and QR codes.
Right.
You need to audit your own career for copper wires.
Meaning the legacy skills or old habits you are holding on to just because it's how things were always done.
Exactly. Do not spend years slowly improving an old way of doing things if a completely new paradigm has arrived.
Right. If a much faster digital or AI-driven option is right in front of you, you don't slowly transition. You abandon the copper wire and leapfrog immediately.
That's it. Don't be the person clinging to the physical checkbook, professionally speaking, when the rest of the world has moved to instant digital transfers.
I love that.
The second piece of advice is about adopting a demographic and global mindset.
Because the economic gravity of the world is definitively shifting toward places with young, hungry, tech-savvy populations.
Exactly. If you want to become wealthier and more successful in the 21st century, you cannot have a hyper-local mindset.
Yeah.
You need to understand and collaborate with global markets.
Right.
Your competition, but also your greatest potential collaborators, are no longer just the people in your local town or your college graduating class. They are the highly educated, incredibly driven young professionals in Bangalore, in Pune, and across the multiplex world.
Here's a question for you. If you were running a country today, would you focus your budget on building traditional infrastructure like roads and bridges, or digital public infrastructure like mobile payment networks? Let us know your thoughts in the comments.
It's a fascinating choice, and often, you have to find a way to do both. To
Yeah.
wrap this all up, it is crucial to recognize that India still faces immense structural challenges.
Yeah, for sure.
We are talking about widespread poverty, severe urban pollution, water scarcity, and the desperate, ongoing need to create millions of jobs every single month just to keep up with that massive young workforce.
So success is definitely not guaranteed.
It's never guaranteed.
Yeah.
But the story of India proves a fundamental truth about our world today. The future doesn't automatically belong to the nations or the individuals with the oldest wealth or the deepest history of dominance.
Right.
The future belongs to those who can adapt the fastest. The 21st century is being coded, manufactured, and driven by the East.
It is a profound wake-up call to stay curious, remain adaptable, and never stop looking for the next leapfrog opportunity.
If you enjoyed this episode of The Missing Lessons, don't forget to follow the podcast, leave a rating, and share it with a friend. Your support helps us continue exploring the topics school never taught us.